In the world's oldest democracy, the United States, a popular notion has been around for a long time, which is the curse of the second term. Now, what people really mean by that is that a president usually encounters much more trouble in his or her second term. And this is sort of played out in the Reagan years. With the second term, there were all sorts of scandals which undermined Reagan. It's something which was spoken about even under the Clinton regime. But what I did here was to test it, and to test it in particular for the emerging world, because I think that politics and what policymakers do matters even more in the emerging world than in the developed world. In the developed world, the institutions tend to be strong, and how much politicians can do is a bit more limited than, let's say, what can happen in the emerging world. And I was quite fascinated to see what the results here were. The results basically showed that if a new leader came to power, in the first 2 years, that country's stock market, which is a proxy for the overall economy, did quite well. But after that, the stock market did not do that well. And in the second term, if that same leader was re-elected, the stock market very rarely outperformed other stock markets in the world. Now, why does this happen? And this is something which we have seen in the last few years with many leaders in the world. You take the case of Putin. There's so much negative press today about Putin and how he's running the economy into the ground. But the Putin who first came to power in the year 2000 as president is very different than the Putin you get to see today. The Putin who came to power in the early 2000s was in fact an economic reformer. He cut taxes in Russia, he tried to integrate Russia much more into the global economy, and he tried to bring some order into a country that was being taken over by oligarchs and being corrupted to the core as well. But as Putin has stayed in power longer, he has really become a classic dictatorial leader who sort of is running the country for his own good rather than for the good of all the Russian people. As you know, that of late Putin comes across as someone who's belligerent, someone who's not carrying out any economic reforms really, and someone who's really playing defense in trying to save the economy from disaster given the fall in oil prices, rather than a president who's in command trying to integrate the economy with the rest of the world. Manmohan Singh, I think that had Manmohan Singh been just a one-term prime minister, his legacy and how he would have been viewed by both Indians and the world would have been very different than the Manmohan Singh today, who stayed in power for 10 years and his second term is widely viewed as a disaster compared to his first term. You take the case of the Indian stock market too. During the first term of Manmohan Singh, the Indian stock market handily beat other emerging stock markets in the world. But the second term of Manmohan Singh, the Indian stock market underperformed other stock markets in the developing world. And the second term, there were all sorts of problems which he encountered, including the fact that very few economic reforms were carried out in the second term until 2013, when India faced a mini rupee crisis in August, September of that year. So that is my point, which is that the longer a leader stays in office, the worse it is for that country's future. And when new leaders are elected to power, the better it tends to be for that country. And the first couple of years of a new leader being in power typically tend to bring the maximum excitement to the local investment community, because that's when the hopes are the highest for new economic reforms to be carried out, because the new leader has the highest amount of political capital in the initial part of his term.